Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Soul Seekers podcast, where we believe that hunting has the power to transform lives through primal adventure, as we share our mission of mentorship is conservation. To learn more about everything we do, check out our show on Carbon TV or go to soulseekersnation.com. Freedom on, everybody, and stay soulful. Do you want to become a better shooter, reduce flinch, protect your ears, and just overall enjoy shooting your gun that much more? Then there's no better way to do that than by adding a suppressor to the end of your barrel. Be sure to check out Huxwrx Safety Co, as they are a leader in the suppressor world with their OSS Flow-Through Technology, virtually eliminating blowback and toxic gas that can affect weapon system performance and shooter health. To find out more about Huxwrx, go to huxwrx.com. That's huxwrx.com, and go get yourself a suppressor for your upcoming hunts. This podcast is also proudly brought to you by OnX Hunt. When I first got into hunting, I kept hearing all about public land and different access and how to find different locations to hunt. I was like, well, how are people even identifying all this stuff? Well, sure enough, I came across the number one hunting GPS app, and that is OnX Hunt. If you guys want to get better at hunting and go deeper into your scouting, OnX Hunt is the number one GPS app for that. Join the millions of hunters who trust OnX Hunt to find more game, discover new access, and hunt smarter. It was a game changer for me, and I know it's going to be a game changer for you if you've never used it. If you have used it, you know the power that it holds. Guys, I really hope you enjoy this episode. If you want to know more about OnX, go to onxmaps.com/hunt. And check out their app. Be blessed, freedom on, and stay soulful. If you're in the market for optics, I want you to go check out blackdiamondoptics.com. Black Diamond Optics offers world-class sporting and tactical optics, including thermals, all at wholesale pricing, direct to consumer. They are going to be partnering up with us for 2023, and I want to start pointing you over towards their direction. Check out Black Diamond Optics. If you've got any questions about it, shoot us a message. Love to hear from you. Be blessed, everybody. All right, guys, if you're looking for a better way to stay hydrated this coming hunting season and on all your adventures in the future, go check out hardsidehydration.com. Their swig rig is awesome, an absolute game changer when it comes to staying hydrated. I get tired of playing around with any water bladders in my bag and having to remove things to get to them and the chance of them puncturing and all that. So what Hardside did, take Nalgene's, got multiple sizes, and you're attaching your hose straight to that. Keep it on the outside of your pack, a lot easier to use. They also have a lot of other cool things. Go check out hardsidehydration.com. Use the code SOULSEEKERS10. That's all one word. Save yourself 10% at checkout. Hope you guys enjoy this podcast. Be blessed. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Soul Seekers podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Mack, and today I have a phenomenal episode for you that's going to dive into the taboos of the hunting world, the spiritual world, and even the legality world, because we're going to be touching on a lot of different topics that are not often spoken about, kind of like the hidden taboos of the outdoor nature world. So without further ado, today's guest is a participant on season 7 of Loon. If you watched that season, you know it's a brutal one up in the Arctic, and it was a struggle fest. So without further ado, we're going to invite Joel Vanderloon on. He is here. We're going to be diving into all different topics, and I can't wait. Joel, my brother, thanks for joining us, man. How you doing?
Oh, of course, man. I'm happy to be here chatting with you.
Dude.
Yeah.
Podcasting is so much fun. I still get a kick out of it. When I started the show, 3 years ago or however long it's been, and I look at how it's just opened the doors and networked, allowed me to connect with people such as yourself. I can't believe here we are on a Sunday evening, sitting down, having a conversation.
It's incredible. I mean, the amount of the positive influence I've had in my life from podcasts. I mean, I'm not big on the whole social media and technology, but there's definitely some great that can come out of it.
Yeah.
And I certainly know in my life, I've been influenced heavily by podcasts for sure.
Podcasts have played probably one of the biggest roles on me as well. I love listening to them, whether I'm walking or running or just driving in the car. It's like, get tired of music, get tired of the same thing, the monotony. It's And I, as a child, it's funny. I remember used to drive to school with my father, and he'd always have talk radio on. I'm like, man, talk radio is so boring. You know, like give me something to bob my head to and tap my foot
Yeah,
to. But as I've grown up and I've matured, I've come to understand that at the end of the day, iron's supposed to sharpen iron, right? And if
yeah,
we are, as I believe, co-creators in this world with our God, then we, how we co-create is with the verbal word, because that it
yes.
starts with that. That's the creation. Because other than that, we're reacting to our environment. So,
Well, the storytelling aspect, right? Like if you think about back in the day, I mean, obviously, you know that I spent a lot of time with the Hadza Bushmen, and like storytelling is something. It's their entertainment. They don't have the screens. They've got a fire and they've got each other. In those evenings when it's dark and there's nothing to do, you talk. And I think that these podcast formats are so incredible because especially when you can have two individuals that really connect and they're prepared to be vulnerable and talk deeply,
yep.
to be that fly on the wall and really just listen to how they interact, so much can be gained from it. Almost like you feel like you're drawn into that conversation. You're part of it.
Yeah, 100%. It's interesting that that is lost, right? And especially with COVID in 2020. So, being a school teacher, you're used to being in front of children and having that physical interaction and them being right there. But as soon as the world went
Yeah.
digital, people have tuned out and they have lost their ability to communicate, whether it's like verbally or eye contact or like
Mm,
physical touch, to be able to
yeah.
put your hand on somebody's shoulder and be like, I hear you, I see you, you know, that's been lost through
Absolutely.
humanity. And I'm like, it's time to get it back.
Well, agreed. I mean, I think that the level of the quality of the conversations and the level of connections can still be had when you look at someone through a screen. I mean, I hate to even admit that I'm going to say that, but I honestly believe that, like you and I here right
Hmm.
now, me looking into your eyes, like I feel like you're right here in front of me, and
Yeah,
it doesn't affect the level of conversation that I can have, which is an unbelievable luxury of this modern day age.
right.
Is you're in Texas, right? And I'm here in Oregon, and we're like right in front of each other.
And the root of that is that we have a desire that we want to. We
We want to.
we want to be in community. We want to have connection.
Yeah.
We want to not live alone as you did on season 7. And it's like
Yeah.
man is meant to be in community with one another.
We are, and you know what? Like I said, if it means that I have to look at it through a screen to have that, to have a good conversation and walk away feeling really good about it, I'm prepared to do that. I'm happy to do that. However, I can connect with other like-minded individuals like yourself. Hey, I'll do it through a screen.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, without further ado, let's dive into a little history on yourself. So share, you obviously have an accent, so you're from another location if people are not familiar with you and who you
Yeah.
are. What is it that you do, and how did you get into the hunting and the survivalist aspect of this life?
Yeah, so the accent is from the motherland. It's a South African accent. I was born in South Africa, and then I was raised partly between South Africa and Tanzania, East Africa. My parents separated when I was about sort of 8 or 9 years old. My dad took some work up in Tanzania, East Africa, completely foreign country to him and to us. We didn't even know where it was initially.
Hmm.
And he ended up setting up shop there. That's where he lived for over 20 years. And I would go up there as a kid on all the school vacations that I could get, and I really fell in love with the country.
Mhm.
It was really when he had purchased a big piece of land there, which was off grid, that I truly felt connected to the place, and it felt like home. And I was blessed to be raised on this property, which we don't own anymore, which is hard.
Yeah.
My dad sold it about, I think, 5 years ago, and he immigrated to Australia. So I'll never probably set foot on that property again. But the lessons that I learned out there were phenomenal. We had the Maasai are a tribe in East Africa, and they're very, very bush savvy. And we employed a few of them because we had a lot of dangerous animals on the property. And so just to kind of, as sort of watchmen, as guards on the property to keep an eye out for these animals. And so I would go hike off into the bush, and as a young kid, they would come with me just to look out for me. And I would ask them questions, and they would tell me things. And it all started with tracking. They used to point out all the tracks on the ground. They'd be like, "Look, this is where a leopard came last night, and this was a bush pig." And,
What?
and then and it then led into the fascination of, oh, bush pig, let's hunt them.
Right.
And I convinced them to let's track down bush pig and let's hunt them. So that became an absolute sort of. I'm like this. I get obsessed with things. So I got obsessed with these bush pig. And yeah, we'd hunt rabbits on the property. It was coastal, so I would just go jump into the water down on the ocean and go spearfish. And I just had this wild childhood that was completely celebrated and supported by my parents. 5 years old, I had a pocket knife and a box of matches, and I was making fires and cutting things. And I just had this free to roam feral type of childhood, and my parents were all about it. And so that's just the person I became. I became obsessed with adventure. I've always loved hunting and fishing and being in the outdoors. And it really just it was an incredible childhood. It's where it all started from. So
that is such an amazing story. One of the biggest things that comes up is thinking about my own childhood, right? Because as we view the world, we always view it as a lens through our own personal experiences, our perspective of how we've lived. You're talking about these stories in your youth. Where was fear? The concept of fear in your life at this time?
So, fear is an interesting subject to me because fear and self-doubt are, for whatever reason, something that I've never really faced. I've just never looked at any obstacles and feared that I would not succeed or be held back because of the danger aspect, which is probably a bad thing too, because there's certainly a lot of experiences I've had where I could have died. I mean, straight up, if something had have been a millisecond difference, there would have been probably a completely different end result. So, but yeah, like as a kid, especially as a kid, it just didn't exist.
Man,
Yeah.
it's interesting. So I grew up in a house that I was afraid of failure. I had a family structure that you didn't want to disappoint people, and at the same time, somehow I was ingrained with fear, right? And so it's interesting hearing you talk about this.
Fear of failure, right? We're not talking about like fear of like the boogeyman in the dark. We're talking about legitimate fears, right?
Right, but I also think it's the same thing because I used to also be afraid of the dark, and I told you when we first had our very first conversation, I was 34 years old when I killed my first big game animal, which was a black bear.
Okay.
And I was scared of bears in the woods. I'm like, oh man, and so that's why hunting has been so transformative for me, because it challenged my manhood, my grit, my courage.
Yep.
But when we remove all the traumas of our lives, right? Like, whether you're an abused child or you had something really negative happen to you, you kind of wonder, it's like, what would a human being end up growing up as if they didn't have all these negative things affect them at such a young age? Because here you were just kind of living your life, doing your thing.
Yeah, it's really interesting how we're all that's that element of what we're exposed to as kids shapes us in a way. I think we also just have that inherent aspect of who we were born to be, and it's sort of juggling the two. It's quite an interesting dynamic. I wouldn't say that I had challenges, sure, as a kid. Like I had some, various failed marriages between, my mother and father. They both had failed marriages twice, and I I kind of, as a kid, remember that being tough to deal with, especially because dad left, and I didn't have him in my life as a presence consistently. So it was tough, but I just sort of embraced it for what it was. And now, as an adult, I mean, I've done a lot of work. We all have our things, right, in life, but
Yeah.
I can look back at it as all being extremely valuable. But I don't look at my challenges like I do others who have legitimate challenges. I mean, we're talking like real challenges,
Yeah.
right? Like sexual abuse, and I mean just horrendous things that
Right.
they have to really work through. And that I think that things like that, as horrible as they are, and it's as terrible as it is to say, often those difficulties can end up really breeding a very strong character in a person.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I've met some amazing people that have truly had such rough upbringings, from gangs to murder to death and family. I mean, you name it. And the strength that they have is admirable.
Well, you being from South Africa, you understand the whole concept of a diamond, right?
Yeah.
That diamond
Yeah.
only comes about through the pressure that it's put under. That
Yeah.
coal just keeps getting squeezed and squeezed and squeezed until it's like, I can't take it anymore, and bam,
Yeah.
that diamond appears. You know,
That's a really good analogy. I like it.
Oh
Yeah.
man, brother, I'm
Yeah.
so excited to dive into this stuff. So we got a little off track right there. So you
Yeah.
just grew up in the woods. You grew up tracking animals and hunting these. You call it wild hogs, wild pigs. What?
They're bush pig, but
Bush pig.
they're basically like wild hogs, like very very similar looking to the ones here in the U.S.
Okay.
Yeah, very similar. They're more aggressive.
Okay.
But pretty much physiologically the same.
And so you already said that you felt like, or you view life differently. You don't feel like you're ever gonna fail, like anything's possible. And so setting off on the TV show alone, was that like, oh man, I want to do that? Or was it something that just kind of the dominoes fell where they did and you ended up on the show?
Oh, I wanted to do it
Yeah.
with all my heart. I felt like I was absolutely. So before the show contacted me and asked me if I wanted to go out and do it, I had been doing things very, very similar.
What's up, Soul Seekers Nation? Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I really appreciate it. As a reward, I have some discount codes for you to use if you are in the market for a brand new hunting pack. Go check out initialascent.com and Initial Ascent packs. They are made in America. Their one-piece carbon frame is an absolute game changer. We run their packs. We love them. And you can save 5% at checkout by using the code SOULSEEKERS. That's all one word. Also, for those of you who are archery hunters and you are tired of shooting at dots on a target, check out deadnutsoutdoors.com for their lifelike 2D archery targets. You can save 20% on all of their products by using the code SOULSEEKERS at checkout. Once again, the code is SOULSEEKERS, all one word. Go check out initialascent.com and Dead Nuts Outdoors. Enjoy the podcast.
I'd been working for a survival school as an instructor, went through an intensive program, started up my own school, started teaching survival, and I really wanted to teach from a place of experience. So I just threw myself out there, and I mean, spent 10 days in Alaska living off the land with barely any tools. I went to the jungle in Nicaragua. I did the same thing. I spent time in the desert. I fasted. I experienced dehydration, severe dehydration. I mean, I tried to experience all the aspects of what it is to be out living off the land with very minimal tools. And those experiences really helped me form a very deep connection with the natural world and our creator. And I felt like when Alone came around, that it was going to be this is my calling for the ultimate spiritual endeavor in the woods. Like it felt like this. I mean, it excited me. It didn't scare me. It excited me. I wanted to be out there. When they dropped me off, I'll never forget, the helicopter dropped me off, the helicopter's taking off, and I just started like laugh crying. Like laugh cry, where you're so emotional, you don't know whether to laugh or cry.
Oh, yeah.
It was just like, finally, I get to be with my creator in his creation alone.
Mm-hmm.
And we get to start this process of, let's see who I really am.
Yeah.
And let's go deep.
Yeah.
I mean, for me it was a spiritual endeavor, 100%.
Okay, so I love the spiritual aspect. Just so you know, here, and all you listeners, if you haven't caught up with me from the early on days of this podcast, we have brand pillars. We got 6 of them that keep this podcast going. So when I'm looking for topics that I want to talk about or things I get into, these are our pillars of the podcast. Number 1 is mentorship. And I guess these are no specific order, right? Just mentorship. Number 2, community. Number 3, self-discovery. Number 4, natural connections. 5, conservation. And then 6, primal adventure. So everything that you're talking about, Joel, like
I came to the right place, man.
You came, like let's go, baby.
Oh man, we're speaking the same language here, no doubt.
So I totally understand. So what you're talking about. One of the things I want to hear what your view is a lot of people within the survival space and the naturalist, like primitive skills classes, they're more spiritual with like this connection of energy and Mother Earth and all that, versus like a specific God of like the Bible or of the Jewish cultures or anything like that. Where do you stand and what's your belief? Because you've already talked about being in creation and being with your creator. So what is your view of that?
That is a great question. And I think I'm still figuring it out myself. There has been very distinct experiences that I've had in life, both psychedelic and non-psychedelic, that have given me a lot of affirmation that there is a creator. This is all perfect engineering. This is not something that
there's
just
no
came
coincidences. No coincidences.
No coincidences. There's no luck. Everything has a purpose. Everything has a lesson. Mm-hmm. And so I think that the way I look at it is that, let me try my best to describe this.
Yeah.
I believe that the entire universe is made up of energy, or we could call it a vibration, a frequency. Every single thing on this planet, in this creation, contains it in varying levels, as do we. Our creator who created all of us, we are that vibration, as he or it is that vibration. So I am God. You're God. The elk behind you is God. The table's God. Everything is God because it is made from God. So it is of God. It is God.
Yeah.
And when you look at that and when you can be out in nature, and I think nature is really what has given me that lens. When I look at how perfectly designed certain things are, I see creation. I see the creator in those animals, in the plant, in the complexity of it, as I see it in the complexity of us. And so for me, it is more of a spiritual, energetic belief than it is with a very specific God that has a specific name. I guess I definitely lean a lot more to the Native American belief system. And, in reverence of all of the creation on earth, Mother Earth, Father Sky, I look at it all being from the same source.
It's really interesting. Do you have any religious background at all?
I actually do. My mother, so my grandparents were devout Jehovah's Witness.
Okay.
And my mother was raised as a devout Jehovah's Witness. When she became an adult, she rebelled and she left because of the restrictions that the religion dictates, and she didn't agree with. But as far back as I can remember, my grandfather was a huge influence on me in my life. He would always tell me stories about Jehovah and about the Bible. And I would always have a lot of questions because I was always deeply interested. As a kid, I remember knowing that there was something out there, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And I guess maybe I just rebelled because I was a little punk against the fact that there would be a God, because I couldn't see him, I couldn't feel him, I couldn't hear him. How could he exist? But my grandfather used to explain it to me in such an amazing way. In fact, he's a big reason that I have become such a believer. And so my life has been so much more dedicated to our Creator, is because of all his explanations. And I've only realized that since he passed away a few years ago, how much his teachings affected me and prepped me for my belief system. And I'll never forget, one of the things he said to me was, I said, but Grandpa, like I don't see him. I don't feel him. Like, I don't understand. How do you believe in something that you cannot see? And he said to me, he's like, Joel, you see the socket on the wall over there? Why don't you grab that metal knife out the drawer there and go and stick it into that socket?
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's no way I'm doing that, Grandpa. He's like, why? Because I'll get shocked. Or how are you going to get shocked? Well, there's electricity in there. And he's like, oh, so you know there's electricity in there? I'm like, yeah. He's like, show me. So I'm like, well, I can't show you. It's invisible. And he's like, interesting.
Yeah. I always use that in regards to the wind, right?
Yeah.
People, you can't see the wind. You can only see the result of the wind.
You can see the result. Yep. But here's the thing. You can't see the wind, but you can feel it.
Yeah.
And this is where my spiritual growth has really developed, is that I feel Creator. There are signs that are presented to me all the time to affirm that creation is watching me, is in support of me. Oftentimes there will be affirmation of things that I need to change. I do believe that my relationship with our Creator stems off of our God-given intuition. I know for sure that the heartfelt intuition never lies. So if I really trust my gut, I always feel like I never make a bad decision. When I after the fact, I look back and I'm like, okay, I made a great decision. When you get caught up all in your head and you try and use your human intellect, which is inferior compared to the divine intellect, I will often make bad decisions and bad mistakes. So just trusting in that intuition has led me in a path that has gone from rural Africa all the way here into America, being on a show like Loon, starting up a business, marrying my wife here, just incredible opportunities that if you had told me as a kid I would have had these opportunities, I would have laughed at you. But here I am, and it's all just following creation's path. That's it. I just follow the signs.
Yeah. It's fascinating. Yeah. I love your story, and I resonate with it. I was raised in a Christian church, and reading the Bible, and Old Testament, New Testament, and Jesus, and all this, and I live a life where it's an and life, not a or life, right? So I believe the Bible, and I also know that everything has a vibrational state. And it's really interesting that when they're teaching science, chemistry class, sophomore in high school taking chemistry, and they're like, well, everything's broken down to atoms, and in those atoms are, your protons and electrons, and they're bouncing off each other. And when you combine these different things that are bouncing off each other, they build more things that those bounce off each other, and they rotate around each other, and they're creating this motion that creates a physical, tangible object as I hit my pen against my notepad right here.
Yeah.
And so as a sophomore in high school, I'm like, okay, yeah, give me more. But then it's just dismissed. It's just like a chapter in a book, and you move on because that's not important. And so here I was reading the Bible and being told, you can move mountains, right? It says in the Bible, we can move mountains. Elijah called down fire from heaven, that we are more than conquerors through Christ Jesus, that, that we are made in the image of God. And in his image, we have the power and we have the authority to cast out devils and demons and like, going like the religious aspect. But I understand that there's energy, vibration, movement to everything, right? Like, how are we virtually having a conversation where our voice gets translated into some copper wire and sent wirelessly all the way across 2 time zones, 2,000 miles? Like,
Absolutely.
this stuff just, I don't understand it, but I understand it. Kind of like a child's understanding of like, well, trust. I think that really just sums it up. There's trust.
Trust. Yeah, trust is a big, and when that's very difficult in the beginning, but once you start to get the affirmation that by trusting you see the results, you start to trust more. And then instead of things being, wow, that's a crazy coincidence, it starts to change to, of course,
Mhm.
of course. I mean, the animal signs that I get on a fairly regular basis are always confirmation for me that there's a much deeper level of there's a much deeper relationship spiritually between us and this planet.
Mhm.
And I think it's very hard. I think certain individuals have a much deeper understanding of it. I must say I'm on that path to deepen my understanding of it, but I know it exists and I respect it and I believe in it. And I mean, ultimately, you have to ask yourself, like, what is belief? Because what is belief? Is that to you? Is that you working all of the facts out in your head to come up to a conclusion? Is it like a mathematical equation in your head and you come up to a conclusion that equals yes, I believe? Or for me, what I believe is that just like when we were born as kids, we instinctively know what's good and what's bad.
Okay, so I was going to ask you this because as you're talking about humans and mankind and all this stuff, are humans inherently good or are humans inherently bad or evil?
That's it. You know, I don't think I have the answer for that, but I do believe, I'd like to believe that we're inherently good. But I also think that there is a lot to be said for past life trauma. I believe that so just to kind of backtrack a little bit, I agree with you. I do. I believe in Jesus Christ. I believe in the Bible. I believe in the Quran. I believe in Buddhism. I believe in Hinduism. I believe in all of the atheists. I believe in agnostics. I believe that everyone has a belief that is founded on something.
Mhm.
Whether it's accurate or not, most of the time it's founded on something.
Yeah.
And I think that all these things are connected in some shape or form. And so, like now I just lost my train of thought. Damn it. I was going somewhere good with it. What was the
Let me see if
question?
I can help you about inherently good or inherently evil.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah. So past lives.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. As a thank you, I got more discount codes for all of you. If you are in the market for anything in regards to calls, whether it's elk calls, turkey calls, deer or predator calls, you can save 15% on all Rocky Mountain hunting calls by using the code SOULSEEKERS. That's all one word. And if you're in the market for hard side hydration, a better way to hydrate, go check out hardsidehydration.com. Use the code SOULSEEKERS10 to save 10%. And we also have a discount at Graxaw.com. That is, Graxaw is the leader in ultralight game bags and other backcountry gear. Light, fast, and efficient is their motto. Use the code SOULSEEKERS, all one word, to save 10% at checkout.
Why is it that well, first of all, I've had psychedelic visions of past lives that I've lived, and I believe them to be absolutely of truth. So with that revelation comes the knowing that just about every living being has probably experienced their energetic form in a different life. Do they remember that past life? Probably not, but they probably will be carrying something energetically with them from that past life. I mean, you think about this capsule that we live in right now, it's a human body, right? But the energetic source of who I am and who you are has always existed. So where was it? What was it before it was in this capsule?
Right.
So I think that there is, and I don't understand how it happens, why it happens, when it happens, but I do believe there's certain individual souls that come into this capsule as a human being, and they are carrying something with them that shapes them almost immediately as they come out of the womb. And they don't come into this world, they come into this world with a lot of challenges. And they're not, I think, what most people would call happy or blessed individuals. And why that is, I don't know. And I wish I could change it, but I can't. It's just something that I've observed in my lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to answer that question, I think that there's a bit of both. I don't think that people are inherently born. I think that they are inherently born good, but I think that they have a tough time displaying goodness because of that past trauma.
Okay, that makes sense. Do you believe in the law of attraction?
Absolutely. I just look at the law of attraction as a level of vibrational frequency that we all live with. And when that vibration is lifted to a very high level, it's almost like a very strong satellite signal that gets put out into the universe. And it's going to almost have a magnetic effect on certain other frequencies. I mean, it's just uncanny how you can put things that really call out to you. Just think of something in your life that really called out for you to do. It could have been as a kid, all you thought about was baseball. All you thought about was baseball. It was just like captivated you.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, you start seeing baseball on TV. You start meeting people to talk about baseball. You get invited to go play baseball game. Like, you call these things in, and that's just you reaching out with your level of vibration and pulling it in, for sure.
So confirmation bias, though, is a very tricky thing in the psychology world. Is like, you're more likely to see a certain car on the road when you start driving that specific car. And before that, you didn't really recognize them, and now you're more aware of them. So it's a really interesting thing. These are the challenges and the dialogue that I love to have, because I don't know everything. I know a few things, and I can stand firmly upon them, but I want to know them all.
I think talking about them is the first real step, right? Like, I'm gonna tell you straight up, like, I don't know nothing. I've realized the more that I learn, the more I don't know.
Right.
But it's not gonna stop me from talking about my perspective. And that
Yes.
is something that's really important. If we all talk about our perspectives, the way we see things in a student type of way, where we're truly trying to keep an open mind and learn from others,
Yeah.
we can only benefit from these conversations.
Yep. I want to go back to something that you said, because I believe in the power of words. I already said it earlier, where the co-creation, we create with our voice. Why is it voice? Because a voice creates a vibration effect that sends it out there. Like, it's power.
Yes.
There's power in the word. And the Bible says it's the word of God,
Yes.
like, so we speak. So I grew up praying in my head. Like, I grew up thinking just thoughts of prayers in my head. And I read the Bible, but I read it silently to myself and all these things. And I never felt like I was having growth. It wasn't until I spoke physical words, or audible words out of my mouth to my God, my creator, where I was like, are you real? That he became real for me, because at that point, I wasn't having a conversation with myself anymore. I was having a conversation with somebody else that surrounds me, encompasses me, is within me, like, however you want to describe it. Like, that is when all of a sudden it was like, okay, either you're real or you're not real. And I would say I was 28 years old. I bawled my eyes out on the floor of my bedroom in my house. I remember it was like a Saturday night where I was like, I can't do this anymore. I need to actually know. And so one of the words that you use a lot, or at least within there and society uses, is the word believe. And I think this is a really interesting thing. Just like I like to correct myself and say and rather than but, because but no one
Mm,
cares about what came before that. It's always
sure.
after. It's like, no, we are doing a conjunction, this and that. I love you and you can get better, not I love you and you're, I love you, but you're doing all
But
these things wrong. It's like, well,
yeah.
no one remembers that. So the word belief, I believe. So like, I believe in Jesus, or I believe in hunting, or I believe in rocks, lambs, I don't know, whatever. And the difference of saying I believe versus I know, right? And so this is an interesting thing. We're going to get into this in regards to affirmations, which you were talking about earlier, because when someone says, "Hey, John, do you believe in your parents?" I was like, "Yeah, I believe in my parents." Well, then are they real or not real? Because you believe in them. Like, are you hoping for your parents? Like, no, I know my parents. Oh, so you know that they are real and they are right there. Okay, so do you believe in God? Well, do you hope that there's a God? Do you hope that there's something else out there? Or do you know that there's a God? Do you know that you have all the power that you will ever need within you? And we get to speak about it and live with authority, with the affirmations that in the Bible, when Moses went to the burning bush and God said, I am that I am. I am. I have a contract with myself that I developed a couple years ago at a leadership conference in San Diego. That is,
Mm.
I am a powerful, inspiring, loving leader. That is who I am. I don't have to ever doubt myself if I'm ever nervous before public speaking, before a podcast, before teaching, if I'm not confident in how I am with a boss, with my wife, with parenting, with any situation. I know that I am a powerful, inspiring, loving leader. And that is the person that gets to show up, that's blessed to show up,
Mm.
that is no longer a hope. So I always attribute the word believe to hope, and hope is like a ship that's sinking because you can hope in it
100%.
all you want, but at some point you don't know whether it's coming back to shore or not.
Man, we are aligned. It's ridiculous. Yeah, it's ridiculous. No, we're very aligned. Yeah, I do not like the word believe. It's one of those words that you use it because most people, when you use it, it's the appropriate word to use for something like we're talking about. But yeah, belief for me is not good enough. I either know or I don't know. And if I don't know, I've realized that as I get older, the more that I don't know, I'm actually very accepting of not knowing things.
Mm,
I'll go on a path to try and learn them, but that is where I would determine I either really don't know it or I believe it to be a certain way. But that's different to knowing.
mm,
I know that there is a greater source, a great spirit. I know there's a lot of things that I know, and there's a lot of things I don't know. But I like distinguishing what I do and what I don't know.
yeah.
I don't know. It's just important for me to be honest with myself and be humble with the fact that there's going to be a lot of stuff that I don't know, and I have to accept that.
Yeah. Well,
You know?
the beauty of that is when you can acknowledge what you know and what you don't know, that is a humble spirit. That is someone who leads with humility and say, "Hey, I don't know it. Let's learn together or teach me or
You
show
know,
me."
it's so much easier to live life when you live a life of truth,
Mm,
when you are just humble. It is so much easier. You think about, especially us men, we put a lot on our shoulders, right?
yeah.
Being a father, being a husband, being a good friend, being an employee, being a boss. We put a lot on our shoulders, and we therefore expect a lot of ourselves. And we also have that other self that we think other people need to see. Like we have to hold up this shield all the time that people, they're expecting to see a certain part of us that we need to consistently deliver.
Mm-hmm.
And it's exhausting. It's exhausting to carry that around, to not be truthful to who you are, to your truth, your true self, right? The person that you know you are deep within, but you kind of snuff it out from time to time because of that fear of judgment. That's exhausting. It's so much easier just to be humble and just be unrelentlessly yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's being a chameleon to please others is the hardest thing. And I know,
Yeah.
like, I had a tough weekend this weekend with my children. I have 3 boys, 8, 6, and 4 as of right now.
Oh,
And
that's a handful.
I yearn to be the best father for them as possible. And I screw up all the time, and it really eats at me. And I can tell you the majority of the times as me as a parent, when I'm like really like if I rage on my kids or am I yelling, I don't want to yell. That's one of like I guess you would say triggering things for me is yelling, and yet I repeat this cycle to my children.
Sure.
And ultimately it comes down to ego.
It's ego.
I'm so like, why am I yelling at
Yeah.
my kids? Because I'm embarrassed about how they're acting. Well, why am I embarrassed? Why can't I just accept them and love them and correct them in a manner that is gentle, and loving and humble? But instead it's, hey, don't, people are looking at us, or you got to look like all the other people, or don't, it's just these are the things I wrestle with. Just day in and day out. It's like, okay, I want to be better. I believe in being better. And I
You know
get
what I want to
I get
I
caught
want to
up.
give I want to give you my perspective on that.
Yeah.
The fact that you do wrestle with that automatically makes you a good dad.
Mm.
You got to see that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It automatically makes you a good dad because you are introspectively acknowledging your weaknesses, not to them, but to yourself.
Yeah.
And you can only be a better dad by doing that. It's when you live in a narcissistic mindset that you don't acknowledge your faults. That is when you're not going to be setting a good example as a father.
That's
And
good.
one thing that I definitely feel is very true for kids is it's not so much what we say that they really take with them as they age and develop. It's what we do. It's what we do. There's a reason why all these indigenous cultures, they don't sit down their children and give them lectures for 8 hours a day in their schooling. The kids simply tag along with the parents and mimic them. They mimic. Everything that they learn to do is mimicry. If you look at the Hadza kids, they shoot a bow identical to the adults. They will walk identical. The gait, everything is identical. The way that they use a knife and carve their bows, identical. They all do it the same way. It's like looking in a mirror with each and every Hadza, the way that they work. And I know that translates, even though we've been very domesticated and modernized. I think that our children still are ingrained exactly the same way. They look at us and they want to mimic what we do. So I think that if anything, I'm far from a perfect dad and I wrestle with all of the same things you do, but the Hadza have taught me a lot about parenthood. And I feel like setting that example by doing is probably more powerful than anything you can say.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I really
Oh,
appreciate it.
yeah.
I know that I've always been in my life, I could see somebody do something and then be like, okay, I now remembered it and I could copy it. I could repeat it. So hearing you speak about that is like, okay, I tell my kids, I love you, or hey guys, repeat after me that I am loved, I'm good, I am strong, I'm capable, I am all these things. But will they remember that versus how I show up each and every morning? Good
Yeah.
morning, kids. I love you. What are you grateful for? Like, and acknowledge going through this like The power of physical touch, the energy transfer from one to another, hot to cold, from like,
Yeah, that's
man,
it. So try something. Try this.
yeah,
Uh, try it with the youngest boy. Choose a whatever time is appropriate, and ask him, get onto his level, right down on his level, eye to eye, and just look at him with the most piercing, loving look that you can give to him. And you say to him, hey, buddy, I was thinking, how about we do something together for a couple hours, you and me? And you know, whatever we do, you can decide. You let me know. What do you want to do? Let's do so. And maintain 100% presence with him.
yeah,
The level of energetic exchange that you'll experience with him, I would bet will be tangible, will be noticeable. He is so observant and aware that when he sees that his dad wants to give him his 100% full concentration, that alone is going to lift him up higher than the clouds.
yeah,
That alone,
yeah.
my dad wants to see me. He wants to be with me. That's all they want.
It's really funny you say that because reflecting into I live in Texas. I've moved from the state of Washington, where now I'm in triple digits every day of the summer down here. And all you want to do is get into some water. So we bought an above ground swimming pool, and my kids want me in the pool with them. It's only up to my waist deep, but they're splashing, kicking around. And I'm more in there at times just supervising, like, okay, I'll make sure none of you are drowning. And then I'm like, okay, well, do they want a fun dad, or they want a dad that's like, hey, don't splash me. Hey, like, get off me. Like, and we're not perfect all the time. And this is a struggle. It's like, okay, I'm tired of being clung on to. Like, give me a second. Has society ruined us? Do we need to all go feral and homestead life and get out of this mainstream public education, taxes, retirement, rat race of society?
Yeah, I mean, straight up, society has ruined us.
Yeah.
The societal pressures that we are supposed to adhere to conform to from birth is so apparent, and it's experiences like Alone and spending time at the Huxwrx and being out there hunting, where you are doing something that's so primal and real and raw, that then you step back into this domesticated world and it's so much more obvious where we've gone wrong. I mean, I always use this example of like meat, right? Meat is such a good example. If you ask anyone on the street, 99% of individuals are gonna answer you with the same answer of regarding meat. They're gonna be like, oh yeah, you can't let meat stay defrosted for more than a day. You can't leave it in the fridge for more than a month. You can't. There's all these things with meat, and there's gonna be germs, and you'll get sick from it. And how did we used to live? We never had refrigerators. Like, do you not realize that what we have now is a small little glitch of it's a modern day luxury. We never used to have that. How do you think we got to do you think we'd be here as human beings?
Right.
If we couldn't eat meat that was sitting out of a refrigerator?
Yeah.
No, we've been there and we've done it. We are resilient, and we are weakening ourselves. And it's all these pressures of that society puts on us: speak a certain way, dress a certain way, don't leave the food in the fridge for more than 2 days. Don't eat this, don't eat that. We're conditioned to it, and without even realizing it, it has a huge effect on us. It transforms us into a domesticated being. It's like taking the wolf, and it's like taking the wolf and then using the different breeding to get to a Chihuahua. I mean,
Right.
we're the Chihuahuas,
Okay.
and we have to figure out how to be the wolves again.
So 2 weeks ago, I was up in the state of Washington at my in-laws' house, and my mother-in-law left meat out all day in the sink, defrosting. And my wife was like, you can't just leave that meat out. It's going to go bad, like blah, blah, blah. And she goes, I did this all. This is how you were raised. Like, you're okay. She goes, the meat's not going to go bad. This whole mumbo jumbo of you have to defrost things in the fridge, that doesn't make sense. It takes like a week to defrost your frozen meats. And it's like, and I was just being a fly on the wall to that conversation. And I was thinking to myself, like, man, it's a really good point. Like, I left a lunch at work that I didn't eat last Friday, and it's Monday tomorrow, but I cooked it like previous days before that. Is that going to be good, or do I need to throw it out? Man, we have the world's been pussified, man. It's just
100%. The fact that you even, the fact that you even had that thought process and you question it, that's when you have to just realize, oh, I'm being manipulated. You know?
Yeah.
And so this is the like deconditioning. Like I don't know really how I feel about this phrase, but it's a pretty popular one these days, and that's the rewilding.
Uh-huh. Right.
But I definitely agree with that concept of rewilding, of focusing on the ancestral skills, the ancestral wisdom that we had as human beings that really enabled us to survive against all odds. And here we are in a modern day world with the easiest life that we've ever lived as human beings. And yet we're not content. We're not resilient. We have mental health issues. Why is that? And for me, it's a pretty easy answer because I'm very fortunate to be able to go and step back in time with the Hadza. I can step back into that time frame, and I can really look at the comparisons between where we are today as human beings and where we were, because they still live the same way that they did tens of thousands of years ago. Very, very little has changed. And so it's given me these perfect reference points. And so I am utterly convinced that we have deteriorated as human beings. We really have. I look at how they function as a society, athletically. I mean, the kids. So here's I mean, straight up, kids 7 years old can feed themselves with their bow and arrow. They're completely independent at 7 years old.
Yeah.
Does that not like shine a light on how weak we've become?
Right.
I mean,
I don't even want to give a knife to my 7-year-old. Like
exactly.
Yeah.
And most people wouldn't. Most people would not let their 7-year-old handle a knife and make a fire and shoot a bow unattended.
Which ties us back into the beginning of this podcast where I was talking about fear. Why am I not putting a knife in my child's hand? Why am I not, allowing them to just, run wild, quote unquote? Is because I don't want to clean up after them? Is because I don't want to have to repatch a wall, spackle and paint a wall, or put out a fire, or stitches and band-aids, or I don't know.
Maybe I think it's the fear of guilt that if a child was given a knife and they cut themselves, that you would feel the judgment of maybe your partner, your friends, society in general, that you were an irresponsible parent.
What about what about cutting someone else? That the society perspective, that's a huge one.
Yeah,
judgment.
And it's kind of like it's a really hard. There's no right answer.
Yeah,
because as human beings, we crave to be respected and respected and cherished in our society. We don't want to be outcasts. We don't want to go against the grain. We really want to fit in. We want to. Inherently, I think all of us do. So by doing that for decades, we're now have all got conditioned to it in a way that we are now completely fearful of failure and of risk. We're just We just don't want, we want to remove all risk out of any endeavor that we go in. And you know what? To be human is to face risk. That's what it means to be human. When have you felt most alive, right? When you're doing something that has an element of the unknown,
Yeah.
something that's risky.
And well, the saying, the old saying, to err is human, right?
Yeah.
In order to err, you had to go through a trial or an experience that you were unsure of, that you didn't have mastered, right? And
we had
no risk, no reward.
And we were forced to do that back in the day. We had no other choice.
Yeah.
We had to go find new hunting grounds. We had to. And now we don't really have to take risk, and people have gotten so used to that now it's normal. So now they don't want to take risk.
Yeah, my wife's always like, "Stop doing that. You could get hurt. Stop doing that. You could get hurt." And I'm like, "Yeah, but they also need to be boys." And have you ever read the book Wild at Heart?
No.
Let me see. I got it on my bookshelf right here. I think I gave it away, my last copy. It's a book. I think author's David Aldridge. I'm gonna pull this up real quick. So Wild at Heart is it by let's see here, John Eldridge. That's John Eldridge. So it is discovering the secret of a man's soul. It is this idea that men, and it talks about the masculine and feminine, within religion, Christianity is like this taboo talk. Like people don't really understand it and explain it, and how the males are the giver. They give protection, they give food, they give sustenance, and the female is the receiver, and through that they receive, and then together that combines into the gift that shows up for the world, life.
Absolutely.
So Wild at Heart talks about men specifically, and how men are meant to be the heroes. They are meant to be the knight in shining armor to show up for the women, and how we're not meant to be a child in a desk 8 hours a day, sitting there being told, stop tapping your foot, stop tapping your hand, like stop making noise. We are meant to be wild. We are like what your youth and how you were raised is really how all of us crave to be. And
100%. I think many men do. I think that there's certain men that, and I would say you and I are probably, very similar in this way. We realize that there is an animalistic primal side of us, the wolf in us, that needs to go out and howl. And we recognize that. And we know that if we go out and we're encouraged by our partner to go out and howl, when we come back, we feel content. We feel fulfilled.
Satiated.
And I think that there's satiated, and we can show up as a better man, as a better father. But I think the men that are not allowed to go out and howl, they're kept behind the cage, and they have to live this life being suppressed. I think that is where you get a lot of mental health issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I just think we're meant to roam. We're meant to roam.
There's a lot of studies that have been done within the animal world that play a huge role in the relationship to mankind, and a lot of it, one of them has to do with elephants. How an elephant's like one of the biggest, most powerful animals on the planet that we know of currently to this day.
Absolutely.
And yet all you have to do is tie a rope around its leg and stake it into the ground, and it's gonna realize that, I can't go any further than this rope and stake. And then it gets to a point where it doesn't even need the rope and stake. It just won't leave. It just stays there. It lives a defeated life.
Defeated life. Defeated, that's the word. Defeated. Yeah. You see it all the time. You look into, in particular, I notice it with men. that they have the look of defeat.
Mm-hmm.
They feel so, I think they feel so pressured by the expectations of their partner and their parents and her parents and friends to be in the presence of their family 24/7, that they're not able to go out and really be a man and release that primal masculine energy in whatever way it is, whether it's hunting or whether it's MMA fighting or whether it's fitness, whatever it may be. We need to like release that. And to see men that are defeated is so sad. It's just so sad. And this is where we have to really use good communication with our woman, because to be the best man you can be, it's going to be totally dictated by the quality of woman that you have as a partner. That woman needs to understand that you have to express these things. Mm-hmm. And if she cannot understand it, or at least support it, she doesn't have to truly understand, but if she could support it, you are going to show up in a better way for her and for your kids. 100%.
Yeah. Man, we got so many topics that we get to go over. You're gonna have to be a repeat guest, Joel, without question. I mean, because we haven't even gotten to the stuff that I actually.
Were we meant to talk about hunting?
Well, that's the whole idea, is that hunting has this.
We are talking about hunting. We are talking about hunting.
Yeah.
Because here's my perspective on hunting. Elk hunting is. I've been doing it now. This will be coming up on my 4th season. Mm-hmm. It has been the most transformative thing I've ever pursued in my life. It's for so many aspects. But the thing that I love most about elk hunting is it takes every single facet of what it is to be a man living in this life to get through a legitimate elk hunt. Determination, planning, mental strength, physical strength and endurance, dealing with the ups and the downs, the highs and the lows. You know, it's the troubleshooting, problem solving. It's all the things that you experience in life crammed into 3 days to 3 weeks, however long you get to hunt. And I feel like the lessons, apart from taking meat home, are so valuable. So we have been talking about hunting. Yeah. To me, hunting is a lifestyle. It is life. There is nothing closer to being human being than going out there and pursuing wild game to bring home to your family. Nothing else compares to that.
Well, if no one has ever picked up on this before, the reason why the show, the podcast, and the show on Carbon TV is called Soul Seekers is because it doesn't matter whether we're chasing the soul of an animal, the soul of others in recruitment and mentorship, or just our own soul. We are seeking after something at all times. And I like to use the word hunting in regards to anything. Like, I'm hunting a job. I'm job hunting. Yeah. I'm hunting after a girlfriend, a wife, a spouse. I'm hunting after a bigger purpose in this world. I'm hunting, let's go.
Absolutely.
Let's be relentless in our pursuit, and let's hunt down some stuff. All right, so I want to shift gears here, and I want to talk about something in the taboo world, the woo-woo. The woo-woo.
The woo-woo.
The woo-woo. People can't handle...
Love that word.
Yeah.
I love it.
So I know, and this goes back to believing versus knowing. I know that I feel healthier when I'm in nature. I know that. How do I know that? Well, I know that when I'm in nature, I'm typically sitting on the ground rather than in a chair. More often than not, I'll have my shoes off, or my hands will be dirty, and I'll be touching trees and branches and twigs, and I'll be connecting with nature. And as I've learned about this idea of grounding, that you said earlier, everything has a vibration, there's energy, there's this, and through energy, there's transfer, right? Just like magnets, we can't see the opposing and the magnetic field of one to another or one away from another. We know that a tree can be a nursery tree to other trees. We know that littler
Absolutely.
trees can grow
Yep.
around a bigger tree, and that bigger tree will protect them, and they'll share nutrients. We know
Absolutely.
this
We know that.
through science. We know that mushrooms communicate to other mushrooms through this network in the soil, and that goes to really all living things, because if things can be transmitted wirelessly, it doesn't have to be touch to touch. So if you go onto Netflix and you can watch videos on grounding and psilocybin
Mm,
or mushrooms, psilocybin, different things like that, I've understood that why I'm in nature, I am grounding myself. I'm touching the dirt, the soil, the trees,
mm,
and I feel better. Now we come to our day-to-day life, and we wear shoes that aren't leather soles, so that rubbery synthetic life is a barrier constantly between us and the natural world, right? We live in polyesters. Not many people live in wool, live in like pure cotton, live in pure animal skins or hides, this
sure.
leather material, and that it's constantly uh, removing the connectivity with nature. So the other day, and then this is kind of long, and I want to make sure I pass it over to you. So stick with me here.
Oh, I'm
Is
loving it.
my wife wasn't feeling very good, and I told her, well, actually, let me back up here. We used to live in Washington. In Washington, the weather is cloudy, rainy. It rains the
Yeah.
majority of the year. You're not getting very much direct sunlight. We know that the sun is healing. It gives off energy and nutrients that our body needs to absorb in order to be healthy. So on our way to Texas, we lived in Arizona for 2.5 months, and that was during the springtime, the best time to live in Arizona. And my wife was outside on the back grass of our Airbnb, barefoot, for 2.5 months. Now she wasn't conscious about, hey, I'm barefoot on grass. But my wife's is dealing with celiac. She has gone blind
Mm,
before and been able to recover her eyesight. She has lupus. She has a lot of health issues. And when she was standing on that grass without knowing it, those 2.5 months in Arizona, she felt the best she's ever been. And
mm,
reflecting upon that, it's like, okay, well, you were connecting with nature every day for longer than 10 minutes, for longer than 20 minutes. Like your feet were tickled in that grass, or you were standing outside just soaking it
well,
up.
and a huge increase in sunlight compared to Washington.
Yes. Yes. And so coming down here to Texas, you're dealing with the humidity and different things like that. My wife wasn't feeling very good the other day. And I go, we have one tree in our backyard. And I go touch it. Go take your
Mm,
shoes off, go stand up on it and touch it. I go, I'll stand out there with you for 15 minutes or so. And she, within that time, felt way better. Her stuffy nose went away. Her like anxiety or whatever she was feeling lowered within her body, and she felt more
mm,
clear. And it really, at that moment, it hit me, because here I am, this big macho hunter. Ha ha ha. I'm a provider and a protector. And I was like, wow, how could we increase the connectivity in order to heal her even more? Well, hey, why don't you wrap your arms around that tree? Why don't you hug that tree? And all of a sudden, like a lightning bolt, it hit me. And here we are as hunters, always talking about tree huggers, like, oh, the tree huggers, like they hate hunting, they are anti-ant, this lifestyle. And I was like,
not the hunters I hang out with.
right. And so, just like a circle, when
Yeah.
you oppose on a circle, you go all the way around. You're eventually going to come face to face, and you're going to be connected. So, this idea of tree hugging, grounding, and how hunters are truly, or could be, because they don't have to know it or acknowledge it or accept it. We are the ultimate tree huggers if we want to be, and how we get to speak and create this life to encourage others to join in. Take it, run with it wherever you want, right there.
I agree. I think I think that there is a big shift that's taking place in the hunting world, the hunting person, the hunting man, the hunting woman, and they're realizing that the whole macho aspect of hunting really is not fulfilling. You know, I think that a lot of people are being called out, and I think a lot of the newer hunters in particular are really resonating with this aspect of looking at the landscape, looking at the animal with reverence and respect, and almost looking at it as a rite of passage or a ceremonial practice, almost a spiritual endeavor. And that is, I believe, the essence of hunting. And how, as human beings, we got so off the path to where it became about killing the animal that was the biggest, or the biggest horns, the biggest antlers, the most dangerous. How it got to that, I think, is ego. It's just ego that just got in the way and blinded us of the true aspect of hunting, which I think is, people might call it woodsmanship or bushcraft or whatever. I think it's that relationship, that, and like a wilderness living relationship that used to exist between all of us humans, and every aspect of nature. It's not just the animals that are being hunted. When you watch the Hadza hunt, they're constantly tracking the ground. They're constantly listening to the birds, because the birds tell them what's in the area. You know, the specific plants that they're looking for will dictate what animals are going to be in that area and how the animals are moving through the area. And they love the plants like they love the animals, because they don't see the difference. The animals need the plants to survive, and we need the animals to survive. We also need the plants to survive. Everything needs everything to survive. So why would we not love one and love all the rest? I think that hunting is the perfect example of how you should be a tree hugger, and you should love that elk, but accept that you're going to hunt that elk because you want to eat the meat.
What do you say to the, like, what we would consider the tree huggers that's anti-hunter? That, how can you not see it in
I
that
think,
way? Or
honestly, and I mean, this might get a lot of pushback, but I think it is conditioning. Just like we are conditioned about that meat subject we were talking about, right? If you've raised in a family with no one being a hunter or a fisherman, and you are conditioned to believe that wild animals are precious and we do not kill them, we do not harm them, we cherish them, but domesticated livestock, that's okay. They have been put here to die and feed us. If you're in that sort of conditioning, and I don't point a finger at these people and feel any negative thoughts. I feel, more than anything, I feel disappointment and frustration, because it's a pity. It's a pity that they've been conditioned that way, because if they could truly experience all the right emotions that are involved with the hunt, I think that they would change their mind. And the biggest, I mean, if we even step away from all the woo-woo stuff and we just look at the simple fact that the public lands in America, and let me bang on about this for a second. I've traveled to a lot of countries, right? So I traveled for 12 to 14 years of my life. I left Africa when I was 19, one-way ticket. I sailed across all the oceans. I've traveled a lot of places. There's a reason why I settled in this country, not just because I married a lovely American woman. I love America. The public land system is incredible. And for Americans I think that a lot of Americans do take it for granted, but if they did enough traveling, they would realize just how sensational public lands are. And the fact that the public lands only exist because of hunting, I think, is something that is maybe not talked about enough, and is maybe not respected enough by tree huggers. they would not be hugging trees. They would not be viewing wildlife if it wasn't for hunters. Done in a conservation way, which unfortunately we have to do. I know everyone loves this idea of just, oh, put the wolves back, do this, do that. We have contaminated and tampered too much of the planet. Unfortunately, now it requires managing it. It just is. There's no turning back from that. So it's a very complicated issue, and I don't want to delve down into that issue. Or the point I'm trying to make is that we're basically on the same side. You just got to look at it differently.
Yeah.
Tree huggers don't want animals to die, and I respect that immensely. But then, do they eat meat? Because, if they don't eat meat and they don't want any animal to die, I have nothing to argue with them about. If they're going to fight for animal rights and not eat a single animal, and they're going to stick by that, we're cut from the same cloth. We're cut from the same cloth. But if you are going to be a hypocrite and you're going to, for some reason in your mind, justify that killing a cow that's lived a terrible life is somehow more acceptable and tasteful than killing a wild animal that's going to be way more nutrient rich, has lived a full, meaningful wild life, well, then we're not on the same page, and we should have a discussion because that's where I have my issue, and I think a lot of it is just conditioning. It's how you're raised and what you're told.
Can I just tell you how much I'm enjoying this conversation, Joel? I really appreciate it. It's so much fun to have this conversation with somebody that understands, can see viewpoints, and also is grounded in your own view of like, this is how I've experienced the world. I want to digress.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here, man.
Oh,
it's great.
Dude, it's so awesome. I want to digress here and talk about something that is also then connecting into where we are at with our conversation currently. You were talking earlier about death and life, and do you know that there's a jellyfish that lives forever?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's a certain I don't know the specifics, but there's a certain jellyfish that lives forever. Sea turtles live to be crazy old, like
very old,
ancient old. Trees live to be ancient old. And so I started to think about this for a second, and I had this idea, was brought into this idea of from my brother. My brother hosts the Golden Rule Revolution podcast, and I'd really love to connect you with him because you guys would have some phenomenal conversations.
Yeah.
He went through this experience recently where he was going through this training in regards to gut health, gut biome.
Sure.
And how our gut biome has gone to zero, like it's non-existent anymore. And that is where the health of humanity lives in. So like everyone always wonders like, well, what's the appendix for? Like, why is this little floppy thing? Well, the appendix used to be much larger, and that's where the biome, the health of ourself lived in. And so when the saying of, trust your gut, trust your instinct, where does that chakra lie? Lies in the stomach. In the intelligence, the connection, the intuitions, that lies in your belly. So it made me start thinking, and it's like, okay, if we are made in the image of God, does God die? Is God still alive to this day? Yes. Did he die? Yeah, he was resurrected, depending on what version of God that you're speaking about, Jesus or whatnot. And if you study the Bible, you know that people used to live hundreds of years, 800 years, 900 years, like long lives.
Absolutely.
So how does this all tie in together? Is this idea that we were not actually, no living creature was actually created to die through its existence of a life. It's only from other things coming in contact, bringing about death, right? And I was like, that's a really interesting perspective. How do I wrap my head around this as a hunter, as someone who, brings death to an animal, but through that death brings life and the yin and the yang and the circle of life. And this is such a big thing. I'm even having a hard time putting words to it.
I know. I ponder this exactly the same thing. Exactly the same thing. That's a really hard one to wrap your head around. I guess, what is your the thing that I can't help but wonder about is, we used to, and I said, like I said in the beginning, I think there's a lot of truth to the Bible. We used to live much longer lifetimes. So is it the contamination of our food over time that's reducing our lifespan? Because I mean, I don't know where you were going with that question, but I'm thinking like lifespan of human beings.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be hundreds of years, and now you're lucky if you get 100.
Right.
And you have to wonder what's changed.
Right. Everything that I've
A
heard and
lot
I've
has changed.
read comes to we are what we eat. And so
Yeah.
if we are eating things that are not healthy, not living, as a PE teacher and a health teacher, I've always taught my students, eat the colors of the rainbow.
Yeah,
You know,
100%.
you have,
Yeah.
if it's not a living food, you shouldn't be putting, well, I can't say the word shouldn't. I would recommend you don't put it in your mouth,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
you get to live your own life. I'm not going to cast judgment upon you in that regards.
Absolutely.
So, and then if that goes to the gut biome, we are now disconnecting from our intuition. We're disconnecting from our wisdom
Okay.
because of what we're eating.
Okay. I
And
see where you're going with this.
and
Yeah.
and now through that we're also losing our skills, losing our knowledge. No one holds their knowledge themselves. And this is like we're killing ourselves. Literally, we are
Killing
we are
ourselves.
killing
Yeah.
ourselves off. For what? Like, so I can
Hmm.
I, these are the
Yes.
things that I struggle with when it comes to this idea of, why do I podcast? Why do I hunt? Why am I here?
Yeah.
What is retirement? What is this concept of retirement? Man-made, 40 hours a week. It's a slave system.
It
We
is completely man-made.
we were meant for so much more. So this idea of we're eating poison, poison in, poison out, monkey see, monkey do, right? Like, that is the circle of life. And so by being a hunter, we want better food. We are seeking after better food. And it's an life, not just an or life or a but life. It's like, and
Abs-
we can't just return home and not hunt the remainder. Like, there should be no such thing as a retirement, because we should just be able to take care of ourselves and have our community take care of ourselves, and
abs-
have a support network rather than a reliance on.
Well, that's how we used to work, and a lot of third world countries, it's still exactly the same. In Africa, there is no such thing as retirement because 99% of the population can't afford to retire. There's no there's no 401ks, and there's no like retirement plan. And no, when you retire, when you're too old basically to continue working, your family will take care of you. And that's why Africans, they 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 value having big families, because that means that there's going to be more children, to take care of them when they're older.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very practical way of thinking, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I want to go conspiracy theory here for you real quick, because I truly believe that the more that I'm around people that understand natural connections, they think in this way of like conspiracy minded. As simple as the idea of lead-based paint. This is one that really really trips me out. So lead-based paint became illegal and no one was allowed to use it anymore. And I was like, well, why? Like, everyone was lead poisoning, lead poisoning. Well, I don't know much about lead poisoning personally, but I know that I've chewed on my fair share of lead weights as a fisherman, like biting them on,
Yeah.
and I'm
Yeah.
always touching bullets and all sorts of stuff. And I mean, there is such thing as heavy metal, of poisoning. With that, I was like, well, why did they really ban lead paint? Because lead is what you put on when you go take an X-ray, and it protects against the radiation and rays and transmission of stuff in this world. I was like, oh well, what's better way to share radio signals and Wi-Fi and all this other stuff than to remove the barriers that in which it would have to cross? And so, have you ever thought about that before?
I definitely have not. This is no, I'm very interested.
So I tie this all into
Yeah.
what we're talking about in this idea of hugging a tree and grounding and hunting is we live our better lives or maybe even our best lives when we're connected with nature.
Yes.
When we remove these barriers of the poison of modern day society, whether it's spiritual, physical, intellectual, emotional, social, or even this idea of vocational poison.
Sure.
I just like talking with you. You're the first person in a long while that I feel like understands because you've lived it. What I'm getting at.
Yes, which is almost a burden because I cannot look at life through the same lens as others because of my upbringing, because of the alone experience, because of a lot of other experiences like alone in the woods, with the connection, the rawness that I've experienced with nature. I cannot view modern day domesticated life in a completely positive lens. And it makes me a little bit of an outcast. And I've had many conversations with my wife trying to explain the way that I see things. And she gets it. And others do too, but very few. Most people are so conditioned to this way of life that they don't realize the poisons. They don't realize. And I think a good example, I'm trying to think of a good example that talk about it. I think that the prime example that I have the hardest time with is the pace of modern day life. Our brains, when you're in nature, your brain, I think specifically from my experience, it would be two things in particular that changes the way your brain functions. And you were talking about your wife and the grounding. I definitely believe there's a lot to be said for that. I also think there's a lot to be said for nature sounds and also the pace of nature. I think that because we are nature, we're from nature, we're of nature. When we go back to it and we're fully immersed in it, it takes about 2-3 days, depending on the individual. It takes 2 to 3 days, sometimes up to a week, for the brain to rewire itself, to restructure itself, to adjust to the slower pace. A combination of that, and I really believe that the sounds, the bird sounds, the wind in the trees, the water rushing down a creek, all of those things help us readjust to the slower pace. Once our brain gets onto that level of frequency, like that pace, why is it that when it adjusts, that we feel so blissful, we feel so content, we feel so calm? It's because we are not designed, our brains are not designed to be running at the pace that they run at in this modern world. So the thing that I battle with the most is this phone call, answer an email, someone's getting your attention, then you're driving, then you're stopping, then you're at work, then you're greeting someone else, then you're you're buying groceries, then it's pick up the kids. This is completely unnatural for us human beings. Yet we not only are we completely conditioned to it, we actually will celebrate it. Oh, that person's the CEO of a company. It's a crazy pace that she puts up with. I'm floored. I'm amazed at how she can deal with that workload. She's so impressive. He's so impressive. I I don't know how it's come about that that pace is something that we want. There's a difference between there's a difference between having to adjust to that pace, and this is the difference that I'm talking about. The difference between me and that CEO is that I do not want that pace. I do everything in my life to slow my pace down and avoid things like stress. And there's people out there that desire for it because I think part of them is so conditioned to that fast pace that the brain cannot slow down.
Yeah.
It cannot slow down. Think about it, especially with the youth. They've been pretty much from birth, they've been so conditioned to that pace, that overstimulation, probably a better word, overstimulation, that they cannot be left with themselves because the pace is too slow. You actually have to like go internal, be introspective, be maybe creative to keep yourself busy because boredom will get them within a few seconds. If they don't have that thing that's got their attention, the boredom kicks in. They're not comfortable with boredom because it's not something they experience it very much. So they immediately find something else to distract them and overstimulate them. What I'm looking at is all of these things happening, and I'm like, that is terrible for us. And I know because my mind constantly jumps between the two. I walk this fine line in life between the fast pace and the slow nature pace. And I've gotten used to the adjustment. It was very difficult in the beginning to constantly bounce back and forth. But now I've learned to deal with it because I've realized there is no getting away from it unless you want to go be a hermit in the woods up in Alaska by yourself. I don't by myself. I value community. I love my family. I love my friends, and I want community. In order to have community, I either have to find some commune somewhere where everyone's like-minded, and for it to actually work, which I've done the commune thing. It's challenging. I would rather just live a normal life with good people surrounding me and try to make the best of the situation. And unfortunately, getting away from the overstimulation and this relentless demand of your attention, relentless, is something that we have to learn to manage. And it's horrible. We should not be having to manage that, not be doing that, but we have to.
So you sharing all that, I love it. And where my mind is like, no wonder we're living such short lives. No wonder we're aging so fast,
Yeah.
right? Like if you are
100%.
slowing down,
I mean, it's
like,
the science is there, what stress does to a person. And people assimilate stress just with negative experiences. Like, oh, I'm stressed out because I'm late for my job. I'm overdue with a project. No, stress is like, I've got to take my kid to school. I got to be back to meet the contractor at 9 o'clock. Then I got to rush back, pick him up. Then I've got to, that's stress. You're the fight or flight, the adrenaline, the stress is there. And anyone that is living an active life in that way, where their attention is being demanded in a lot of different areas in most days of the week, that they're experiencing a fairly high level of stress, and that's not good.
and then they're not eating well and they're not exercising, which means they're probably not connecting with nature, which means they're not living their healthiest life. And ultimately, no one's coming to save us. We have to save ourselves. And it starts with our choices and our decisions.
We live, as I always call it, like we're the domesticated man now, right? Just like our canines are not wolves anymore; they're the domesticated dogs. Um, for us, domesticated man, we are, I think, struggling a lot because we live simpler lives, but they're way more complicated to make them simple. Whereas hunter gatherers live very, very uncomplicated lives. They're very, very uncomplicated. All they have to focus on are a couple of things. Just They just need to feed themselves. The women tend to the kids, and I'm talking, majority of hunter-gatherer tribes that still exist, that still practice their traditional ways. The woman will generally do some foraging. They could even construct the bomas or the huts, whatever they live in, and they tend to the children. The men go out and they get the food. It's very simple. Their objectives are very, very simple. It doesn't make it a easy life. It is a hard life, right? It's a hard life. It's simple, but it's hard. And our life is an easy life, but it's complicated.
Mm.
I feel like that is the ideal way for a human being to live, is more like a wild animal. A wild animal knows exactly what its purpose is. It's very simple. Procreate, feed itself, find water, find good protection, and find good bedding. Like it's very, very simple. And they live their lives responding to their God-given intuition. They look at and they think to themselves, or they feel to themselves, is that danger or is that not? And then they react accordingly. It's very simple.
Yeah.
And that's what animals, to me, are like the same way I look at God. I look at them for their teaching.
Yeah.
Because the way that they live is so pure and so perfect. They know who they are. They're not confused. They don't have mental health issues. A wild animal, they don't have diet issues. They don't get, overweight, and they can't do their job anymore because of it. They are living exactly as designed, and yet we are not.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me back in the book of Genesis in the Bible where God created something and he saw it and he said, "It is good."
It is good. I love that. Love Genesis. I love it.
Yeah, it is good. It is
It's
good.
good.
The food, the bed, the air, it's all good. And when you're in an environment like that, it's also not fear driven.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
oh
I just I just think so many of the answers, this topic that we're talking about, this has been a huge interest of mine for many years, and I couldn't think of any way to really get good answers other than to spend time with the oldest human beings alive that still live these traditional ways. And I've gone in with tribes around the world, but in particular, the Hadza have provided me the most teaching, and I've spent the most time with them. To be able to look at, I know I talked about this earlier, but to be able to look at how they live their lives and how we live our lives, it answers so many of these questions that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It's going back to this belief. No, I don't believe. I know where we've gone wrong. That's not the hard part. The hard part is knowing where we've gone wrong and also knowing that you cannot change it. You can do subtle changes, you can do small changes, but you cannot go and reinvent the wheel, because all of your fellow comrades, all of your family, your friends, they are conditioned.
Mm-hmm.
They are conditioned. Are you going to leave them behind? Are you going to judge them, push them aside so that you can go live in your truth? No, you're not going to do that, because that is your family. Those are your brothers and sisters. You need to stick with them. But I just carry the burden of that knowledge. And others that come on my trips with me, they carry the burden of that knowledge too. I have seen almost all the participants that come to me with Africa, and they come and live with the Hadza with me for a week. They are changed beings. They've quit their jobs. They've transformed their lives. There is so much perspective that they've experienced that they'll digest that for years. It'll take me a lifetime to digest what I've seen with the Hadza up till this.
And no one understands it unless you lived it.
No one understands it until you've been there and you've seen it and you've, more importantly, experienced it.
Yeah. Everyone has opinions, but very few people have perspectives, and those come with experiences. Man, it's powerful. What do you think about this idea of like the third eye and, the pineal gland and drugs in regards to hunting? Because there's a lot of cultures that use, different things, the slime on the backs of frogs or
Yeah.
mushrooms or different things in regards to their spiritual quest, their coming of age ceremonies, their hunting, their all that.
Yeah. So I think that the sacred plant medicines are absolutely designed for us human beings. I think that they are there for us to connect to our Creator in a way that is tangible, in a way that we can positively confirm within ourselves that we believe, we know.
Mm.
Because it breaks the barrier of faith and knowing. Because when you have a very informative, transformative experience with a plant medicine, which there's a variety, and you don't even need plant medicines. I think plant medicines are the quickest way that you can start that relationship with creation and with Great Spirit. But you can do it other ways through meditation, drumming. A big part of my life is the Native American drumming. We were talking about that frequency.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the American drum, as it's meant to mimic the heartbeat, right? And the frequency that drum puts out, I mean, scientific is a whole nother thing, but I know that it puts you in a trance-like state. It alters your level of consciousness. And that's what a lot of these plant medicines do, right? And as human beings, I think we've always strived to alter our level of consciousness. And I always, in the beginning, when I started experimenting with plant medicines, I always asked myself, why do I want to alter my level of consciousness? And the answer took me many years to come up with. And eventually I did put my finger on it. And I choose to alter my level of consciousness because I want to get my level of consciousness closer to the God consciousness than just the mere mortal human being consciousness. If I can see things through the lens of love and purity, it will make me a much better person for myself and for everyone that exists around me.
Let me ask you a counter to that, though. Are we not already made in the image of God? And can we not do that naturally without any
Absolutely.
exterior stimulant?
Absolutely. You absolutely can. And I think that relationship with nature is a great way to do it. Things like prayer and meditation, there's a lot of different ways you can do it. You certainly do not need plant medicine, but there is plant medicine provides such a such a tangible experience with source that even the most skeptical, if their mind is open enough, will go into an experience, and if it's the right experience, they'll come out and they will be transformed. And that's the beauty of the plant medicines, is that certain individuals can really benefit from it, but I don't think everyone needs it.
Yeah. Kind of follow your gut, your instinct on going with the flow of nature rather than going against it and trying to find your own way is like,
yeah.
In going to church, I went to, Protestant, evangelical church, and this idea of like hand raising, right, in the church. Like, oh man, I would look across like the congregation at these people, and it's like, oh man, that person must be super spiritual or really tight with God. Their hands are up in the air versus, you get the people with their elbows down. And I don't know if you can see visually, like elbows are down, but palms are up versus the people that won't put their hands up at all. And then are there levels of spirituality or levels of tightness with God or closeness? And what I realized and speak on this is ultimately it began with surrender. In order to vulnerability, having your hands up in the air is total vulnerability. Like when a cop, a burglar, or somebody points a gun at you and you put your hands in the air, you're saying, I got nothing. There's no way out other than what's going to naturally progress. Hands down at the side, but palms up, it's like, okay, I want some of that, but I'm not really ready to get completely vulnerable. So the point of tying that into what you're saying with nature is this idea that if we can ultimately be vulnerable enough to be still and know that He is God, there is a God, there is a universe, there is a creator, that is the purity of life. And then to share that with others.
Absolutely. I think that the biggest trouble for a lot of people is they really want to believe in God. But I think that so here's a great example. My mother-in-law, she's just a wonderful woman. She's truly, I call her mama. She's like a mother to me. Her belief in God comes from the miracles that she's observed. And in her mind, that is her mathematical equation, which equals, of course, God exists. And she has unwavering faith. And I love it. I love that. I admire that. That's how she got there. A lot of people have a hard time getting forming their mathematical equation to give them that answer that, yes, God exists. Some of us, I would include myself, we need to feel that God exists. It's not a matter of trying to justify in our mind that he exists. It's I want to know, and I know things because I feel things. And so that's where plant medicine, was for me my true introduction to God. I always wanted to believe that there was a higher power, and I prayed as a kid, even though there was still part of me, this is ridiculous. Why are you praying? But I couldn't help myself because it felt so right. It felt so natural. Do it. That I did it, even though in the back of my mind, I'm like, I don't know. I don't think he exists. Plant medicine was where I had my first true experience with the divine, and I felt it in every ounce of my being. And there was never, ever, ever any doubt after that experience. So I feel like it can be very valuable for some, but there's others like my mother-in-law that just don't need it. They find their knowing. They find their knowing in other ways. For me, it did take plant medicine. And honestly, I'm at a point in my life where I don't really need the plant medicine that much anymore. I've got a lot of answers to things that I wanted to know. I feel a sense of purpose. I feel fulfillment. I've got enough understanding of what we are as human beings. I don't need all the answers, and I know that I'll live the rest of my life trying to get some answers, but I'm not going to get them all, and I'm completely okay with that. I believe that our Creator gives us what we need to know. But this is, I do think that plant medicine really helps. And, like talking about the hunting aspect. So microdosing with psilocybin has become quite a big thing.
Yeah, it's very popular now.
And so I microdose most days when I'm hunting. And when I say microdose, I'm talking like a pinch of salt, right? Like a very small amount. It's noticeable, but there's absolutely zero psychoactive activity. There is the reason that I enjoy it is because it removes any fear, the sort of the anxiety / fear. There's a lot on the line, right? We take time off of work. We think about this hunting season all year long. I mean, there's a lot of pressure. It just takes that edge off, and more importantly, it allows my mindset to align more on the vibration of our Creator. I can look at nature and feel one with it. I can feel connected. I can feel connected to that animal I'm pursuing. I feel like I am doing what I meant to be doing. And I because of that level of focus and engagement, I get so much more out of the experience. So I feel like hunters out there that maybe are not the tree hugging kind, that are maybe not the ones that walk out with reverence for the animal, that maybe when they go out there, they are looking at it like a conquering mindset. I'm going to conquer this animal. I'm going to kill this animal, and I'm going to take his antlers, and I'm going to be victorious. I would encourage them to try and remove the ego for a bit and consider microdosing and open up their mind to the aspect that there is a sacred aspect to hunting, that there is a lot to be said for asking the ancestral energy in that land, or asking our creator for that animal, bless us with that animal, doing a prayer when you get out there. I follow the Native American ceremonial practices of, you make a fire and you burn some tobacco, and you do some drumming and you communicate with the ancestors in that land. And that's what I do before a hunt. I won't hunt otherwise. And I've had the most incredible encounters and experience, short 3-4 year seasons of elk hunting. And I think that aspect is something that needs to be talked about more, needs to be preached more. And I would encourage any hunter that is not of that upbringing or mindset to just open up the mind a little bit and try it out. And this is where it really, really helps.
Interesting. Fascinating. Have you ever heard of a man by the name of Tim Corcoran?
No.
He is a co-director and founder of Twin Eagles Wilderness School up in Sandpoint, Idaho, and he runs Purpose Mountain, which is this idea of helping men and people, humanity, find their purpose through life. And he's always been really big into Native American ways and spirit quests and vision quests and this coming of age ceremonies and all that. I had him on as a guest not too long ago, so a couple episodes ago. I called it humanity's purpose through hunting. Finding humanity's purpose through hunting. And on that episode, he talked about how when he hunts through the legality of our modern day laws, doesn't matter whether, like, he doesn't quantify or qualify an animal. He shoots the very first one that's within the rules of the game that we play. Because he knows that they are offering themselves up rather than passing and like, oh, I'm going to hold off for a different one or whatever. It's like, this is the one that is surrendering itself as a blessing to you. Do you go ahead?
I'm of the same belief, 100%. Especially when you're, so earlier we talked about the affirmation, right? And these signs. And once you have enough signs within your life presented by the divine saying you're on the right track, you start to realize that nothing is coincidence and nothing is luck. And when you know that, not when you believe it, when you know it, then it becomes very obvious how to live your life.
Yeah.
Because signs present themselves and you either know to go in that direction or not to go in that direction. And I think that when you're out there in reverence with nature, requesting that you be blessed with an animal, when that animal presents itself in a way that is undoubtedly coincidental, that's your animal. That's your
fascinating.
It would almost be blasphemy to turn it up and be like, nope, there's going to be a bigger or better one around the corner.
Interesting. I got to dive deeper into that topic because, and then we'll have to save this probably for another time, but in Western big game hunting culture, that makes sense. Take the one that's presented to you. But within a culture in Texas with deer feeders and deer blinds, and the does are always going to be coming out first, maybe with some spikes, maybe coal bucks, and you're waiting, the king of the mountain, the king of the forest is always going to be the last of the party.
But that's not done in a ceremonial way. That hunting is very different. It's very, very different. You're not at it's very staged. And I'm not disapproving of it. I've shot pigs at feeders. It's fun. but do I get the same level of connection with creation and with the environment and with that animal as I do out in a true wild area? No, I don't. I don't feel God's touch in that setting. That's all I can say about that.
Dude, okay. I love that. I love hearing that. Um, I'm gonna put something in your head for future to chew on, and whether we're texting or have a phone call or a podcast. One of the things I've struggled about in regards to that type of hunting is this idea of what type of food are we putting in this feeder that they're eating. And from my knowledge, it's all GMO based corn.
Yep.
And so it's like, okay, so I'm supposed to be eating this natural wild meat
Yeah.
that I'm infecting with what I would consider poison. Like I'm cutting out GMOs out of my life and my children's life because I know it's not good. Nothing good can come from that, right?
Well, that's a big challenge, especially in Texas, right? Because, like just about any of the wild game that you're hunting there have probably been living on private land because there's so little public land that they've probably been eating the crops. And who's to say that those crops are organic or not? Like you have no clue.
Mm-hmm.
And they've probably been feeding heavily on crops that are GMO or do have pesticides, and there you go and harvest the animal and you feel all great about it. And I've done it too, and I have to question. I mean, I've hunted pigs down on a river there in the hill country, and I'm thinking, well, amazing. They taste amazing because they've been feeding on mostly those what is it, the pecans.
Yeah.
But neighboring the river, there's nothing but ranches and farms. So they're got to be feeding there too. So what have they been eating? I have no idea.
Right. Well, and so people are like, well, they're not just eating. And now I'm just saying it's GMO corn. I don't have a bag in front of me or knowing what everyone's putting in a feeder.
Yeah.
I'm running through this processes in my head. And a defense would be, well, the majority of their diet is going to be just natural landscape.
Sure.
And then they're eating just maybe a little bit of this corn. And I'm like, okay, but would you want to drink a glass of water that had just a little bit of pee-pee in it? Like,
No, right.
right? Like, okay, let's put
You
it
know,
put it to the test.
the trouble with that though, with thinking about things in that way is that it depends on how deep you want to go with that thought process, because they find glyphosate up in the Arctic. The winds have blown this terrible toxin up into the Arctic.
Mm-hmm.
So there are very few places, very few, I'd say almost none, that you can't find some level of contamination in the food that any animal is eating.
Yeah.
I mean, we're right, like all our foods are contaminated, unfortunately, and so we're not really able to get away from it altogether. But if you can take an animal in a wilderness area where you have to hike in whatever 3 to 8 miles, and chances are you're going to get a much better, healthier, cleaner product than you are hunting a white-tailed deer from a feeder on a huge cornfield in the Midwest where they're basically corn-fed from birth. So there's going to be levels of, you know what I mean? So I think you just choosing your hunting area wisely is going to make a difference.
So tying it back into this idea of God, which, by the way, when all you listeners out there, I didn't invite Joel on to this podcast to necessarily talk so much about God and creation in that form. That's just the progression of our conversation.
Yeah.
But I will say this. There's a reason why we're taught to pray over our food and to pray before we eat. And I would say that I know that we do that because stuff is tainted. Whether it's the killing process was tainted, or the food that animal ate was tainted, or the food that we're consuming is tainted, or just like you said, how there's stuff all the way up in the Arctic. we live in a world that has been tainted, and we get to go to our Creator and say, hey, cover us through this process. Bless this meal. May this meal be a blessing to me and my family. May this animal, thank you for its life. May it be a blessing for, the others. Where one place is removed, and it allows someone else to take that spot. And
Absolutely.
I think that's just like, I guess if we focus on the negative, then we're always going to dig deeper into a more negative, more negative. If we focus on the positive, the gratitude, the blessings, then it allows us to just continue to move forward.
I think that word, I think gratitude is one of the most powerful emotions that we can experience. And you almost have to, because in this day and age, it doesn't matter which direction you look, there is always going to be something that's going to bring you down. And so just having gratitude for what we do have, I think is just so powerful, and it feels so right. And I know that the creator that I look up to would want me to focus on gratitude and not be completely destitute with, fear and sadness. I have to believe that there's goodness that's going to come of us. I have to. And I think that,
That this world is inherently good. There we go.
hey, it's idealistic, but yeah, it's that's what I want to believe.
I believe God is good, right? He created things. He said it was good. We covered that in this episode. And ultimately, I think that's where we need to keep our focus, right?
Yeah,
There's a saying that I love that says gratitude makes everything enough.
makes everything enough. Okay, I like that. Yeah,
When we are in a state of
yeah.
gratitude, it doesn't matter what is going on around us. It makes everything that we have in this moment or going through enough.
And this is also why it is so important to have experiences that humble you, because when you get humbled, you usually experience gratitude.
Mm,
Like going to the Hadza and seeing how they operate, how the hunters they are. I mean, it's embarrassed. It's so humbling. It's so humbling to walk among them and see the proficiency at which they operate at. And yet they don't have, there's so many things that they don't have, they're not aware of, that in this modern day world that we have. And so should I look back on this modern day world, this domesticated world, with nothing but disdain and disgust? Or should I look back at it and be like, you know what, I am grateful that I do have running water and it's clean, I
mm-hmm.
can drink out of filter, and I'm grateful that I can have a hot shower. I'm grateful that I can go to a supermarket and I can buy a variety of fruits and vegetables. I am grateful for that stuff.
Yeah.
You I feel like that's just really important. It's all about perspective.
Yeah. Oh man, what a great way to wrap up the show, brother. I'm truly humbled and honored that you are taking time out of your life and your family's life to join us for this conversation.
Oh,
Um,
they need to be had,
now,
and I'm willing to have them. Let's do it.
let's do it. I gotta say, man, this is refreshing and renewing of my soul. This was a super soulful conversation that we've needed to have. I'm not just a tips and tactics guy. I don't get fulfilled through conversations like that.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate it. And I'm very inspired to do a podcast of my own to really have these conversations more, because the more you can talk about these things and the more you can do it with complete honesty and vulnerability, I think that the more trusting, or the more open minded people are going to be to listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
It could change them, even if it's in the smallest way. If it can make them a better father, a better dad, a better steward of the outdoors, then we're one step forward in humanity being better than where we're at.
Absolutely. Joel, brother, share with the listeners some of the things that you do that they can connect with you on, or if they want to take one of your courses or any of that.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, we've been talking about the Hadza. So I take a group of 10 people out to Tanzania every year. It's usually around May or June. So I've got one scheduled every year. That's my website is bushsurvivaltraining.com. That's where so I run with my hunting partner, my mentor, Cole Wilkes. We run elk hunting courses here in Central Oregon. We run an introduction to hunting. That's in Austin, Texas, on February. I run a bunch of one-day survival and bushcraft type courses for kids and adults here locally. But yeah, just teaching part-time is kind of what I'm doing now. I did it full-time and got a little burnt out of it. The part is a good balance, but I'm not very heavily on Instagram, YouTube, which is Joel V Bushcraft. There's a bunch of videos on the Hadza. If anyone wants to go take a look at how they live their lives, there's a lot of content on there. And I think that there can be a lot gained from simply just watching the videos.
Man, that's powerful. That's powerful. When it came for you tapping out on season 7 of Alone, I don't remember. I watched that season and I remember you as a character within the show. But when it came time for you to tap out, were you completed? Were you complete within yourself? And was there something that
Yes and no. There was, so if you remember, I told you the money, the competition, that was never, for me, it was a spiritual endeavor. Spiritually, my cup was overflowing. I got everything that I wanted. But the ego in us males always gets in the way.
Uh-huh.
I wanted to hit 60 days. That was my minimum. And my ego was definitely wanting me to do 60. Physically, I could have gone more for sure. But I was at the point where my body was not reacting. It wasn't giving me what I needed. It wasn't reliable. There were times where I would like trip over my own feet. There were times where the wolves were howling at the back of my shelter and that, and I'm thinking to myself, if that pack comes on me now, I'm not climbing, I'm not running, I barely can fight back. I'm done. Setting and retrieving my gill net, so icy on the slippery rocks. Bottom line is, I knew that there was, for the first time in that whole experience, there was legitimate danger. And I did promise my wife that I would be back there for my son, who was only 2 years old at the time. And I don't think I could live with myself if I didn't come back or had a life-altering injury. So I had to sit with that question, like, do I call it and go home? And I thought to myself, well, here's a different question to ask yourself. What else? Why would you stay? What else do you need?
Mm.
And apart from the lake freezing up to where I could go and fish in the ice, which was something I really wanted to do, and hitting that 60-day number, my cup was full in every other way. So ultimately, I thought to myself, it's time. And it's, well, the craziest thing is, they don't show it on the show, but the day that I decided to leave, I was walking back to retrieve my gill net, and I was kind of in the back of my mind, I was thinking, is this the right decision? Do I go? Do I go? The whole pack of wolves started howling 10 o'clock in the morning when I was walking to my gill. And I was like, there is creation's answer.
Yep.
There's the sign. Your time.
It's confirmation right there. Man. Let me ask you this, and this will be the last question of this, if you don't mind, is we talked earlier about this idea of speaking out loud creates and makes things real. This idea of us being alone or watching alone, and you're constantly narrating and having to speak to the camera, did that almost make you feel not alone?
Yeah. I mean, I never feel alone in nature. So I never felt alone. I just felt without my son and wife.
Mm.
Like I didn't have them. But if I had them, I'd be good.
Yeah.
It's just they're my family. We've got such a strong bond that I wanted them there. But apart from that, the connection that I had with from the squirrels to the wolverine to the birds. I was not alone. Obviously, with the creator, if you look at it that way, I was out there, and he was very much in my presence. So,
dude, you are so cool. Can I just tell you that I think
uh,
you're an awesome human being, and I'm really appreciative to be able to share this time with you.
thanks, man. I really try to be. I work hard at trying to be the best human being that I can be. I try to be real. I try to be honest, and I try to be a light for those that are maybe walking in a dark tunnel. If there's anything I can ever do to shine a light for someone and maybe just help them get on their path, that's what I feel like part of my life's calling is.
Man, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. All right. Well, let's wrap this up. This has been to date, you set a record. This is our longest podcast we've ever done on the
really?
show ever.
I'm honored.
Dude, we're over the 2-hour mark. I'm freaking awesome. I love this. Guys, I hope you enjoy. Go ahead.
That's how it should be with the good. This is how podcasts should be.
Yes.
No real structure. Let it flow. Really. So I really appreciate you having me, brother. It's been great.
Oh, thank you, Joel. Well, everybody, hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you have any questions or comments, or you really want to engage in any of the topics that were covered, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can go to soulseekersnation.com, shoot us a message on the Contact Us page, or reach out to us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, even Twitter. We got an account there. But go follow Joel and his journeys. You can follow him on Instagram at Joel V Bushcraft, or go check out his YouTube channel and sign up for one of his classes. You want to learn a little bit more, go get after it. So remember that hunting has the power to transform lives through primal adventure, and that you can never outgive good. As you are constantly putting good out into this world, it is going to never leave you without. So thank you for tuning in this episode. If you want to support the mission, the show, go check out our online store that we just launched and pick yourself up some merchandise for this coming hunting season. Be blessed, everybody. For Joel and myself, I'm Johnny Mack. Freedom on. And as always, stay soulful. If you enjoyed today's podcast and want to support the show, you can always like, share, subscribe, and leave a rating, as it helps us share our mission of mentorship as conservation. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of Soul Seekers Nation as we transform lives through primal adventure. If you want to get more connected with the podcast, check out the Soul Seekers Nation Facebook group, as I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. So stay tuned and stay soulful.